afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to our Perspectives on Resilience event. My name is Sharon Collins and I'm the director of the Arizona Institute for Resilience, also known as AIR. And it's my great honor and privilege to welcome all of you here today, those participating in person and those participating online. Before I go any further, I have to give a big, huge thank you to our team at AIR that's put this event together: Amanda Lucero, Shelley Litton, Thomas Weiss, Anna Seiferle Valencia, Liz Pedersen, and Deanna Lewis. Thank you all so much for the planning and work that you've put into this event. Yes, round of applause. So as director of AIR, I'm committed to fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging, to creating spaces where everyone feels welcome and is able to bring their whole selves to this place and to the work that we do together. It's in this spirit of inclusion, belonging, and gratitude that we gather here today to listen, to learn, and to share our perspectives on resilience. The Arizona Institute for Resilience was conceived in 2020, and I joined as the first permanent director in August of 2022. AIR is intended to serve as a convener across the University of Arizona campus and beyond, a supporter of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research activities, partnerships, innovation, and education, and to foster synergies among students and researchers across disciplines, which are typically siloed in universities. The goal of AIR is to be a catalyst for developing solutions that will serve our local to global communities to better withstand and adapt to all types of systemic shocks, including those stemming from climate, ecosystems, health, economic, social, and cultural phenomena. AIR is meant to explore and develop resilience solutions with campus and community partners. AIR, as part of the University of Arizona, sits on the ancestral homelands of the Thana-Atham Nation and the Pascua Yaqui tribe. As Arizona's land-grant university and a Hispanic serving institution, the university has made a commitment to serve underrepresented and indigenous communities. This commitment is mirrored in AIR programs that focus on creating authentic relationships and engagement while striving to build healthy, thriving, and resilient communities. Over the past year, our AIR community came together to create a collective vision that would guide our activities and set our priorities for the next 3 years. Out of that process, we developed our vision, a vibrant and sustainable Earth where communities are resilient to environmental change, and our mission to develop and apply diverse knowledges in creating solutions to environmental change through interdisciplinary research, community relationships, and experiential learning. We identified 6 themes that encompass all of the work that we do across the 15 different centers and programs in AIR: water, climate, environment, energy, arid lands, and communities. In all of our work, we engage across boundaries to co-design solutions for environmental and societal resilience. And now to our purpose for today's event. This is our second Perspectives on Resilience event. The first one was held last February, and that emerged from a conversation that I had with a faculty member shortly after I arrived here in August 2022. This faculty member shared with me that they wanted to learn about and connect with others across campus whose work would complement their own, but they didn't know how they could do that in the midst of the already full days that they spent doing research, teaching, and service. So this event was born out of that longing for us to find people across this large and diverse campus to collaborate with and learn from. So the purpose of today's event is celebration, motivation, inspiration. We're here to celebrate the innovative and imaginative work of a diverse group of people who are embracing and exploring concepts of resilience in their research, education, and community engagement activities. We're here to be motivated by the thoughtful and creative work of our colleagues to explore new ways of knowing and connecting to the work of people across our campus and communities. And we are here for inspiration, to be open to ways in which the experiences that we have today may transform our thinking, that may lead to new forms of action in the world. Our agenda today will be fast-paced and interactive. We have 2 formal breaks in the agenda, but please feel free to take a break whenever you need it and then rejoin the conversation. We'll start with some brief welcoming remarks, an original musical composition, an interactive panel discussion. Then we'll move on to a series of 6 short talks from a diverse group of speakers who have been asked to share their perspectives on resilience. We'll have a group networking activity, a second musical composition, and then move to a second round of short talks. In the later part of the day, we'll have an update on the creative work of our annual resilience theme team, focused on drought resilience through soil health, and then a more in-depth discussion from our Reciprocity Ring activity. We'll wrap up with an announcement of a funding opportunity for you all to consider, and then end the day with a reception in our beautiful courtyard, where you'll be able to continue conversation about today's activities while enjoying some good food and some live music. So let's go. I'd like to introduce Dr. Elliot Chu, Interim Senior Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Impact here at the University of Arizona. Thank you, Elliot, for being here.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you all for coming here and spending an afternoon at the University of Arizona. I just want to give a few brief remarks to talk to you a little bit about the University of Arizona and how we like to support this effort and kind of some of the maybe bragging things that we like to brag about with regards to AIR and its mission. So the University of Arizona, as many of you know, is the flagship university here in the state of Arizona. And we have both the flagship mission and our land grant mission, which is kind of an interesting combination. Usually they're kind of separated between institutions. I was just talking to one of the NSF program managers, and he was saying he was from Ohio State, where they have the same interesting combination, where they're the flagship and the land grant. And that brings with it a lot of interesting aspects, right? We worry about access, and we worry about serving the people of the state of Arizona, while also being the place where we think of, the vast majority of research happens at our university. Here at the University of Arizona, we've been focusing, we just did kind of a research prioritization activity to figure out what it is that we really want to talk about and the things that we're particularly strong in. And those areas are, in some order, is data science, space sciences, health, national security, the human experience, and the environment. So the environment is certainly one of the key areas where we think that we can really dig into and be able to talk about and push the boundaries of knowledge with regards to where we're going in terms of sustainability and resilience. But because of our land grant mission, we also, that expands out into how we take that information research and really have an impact in the state of Arizona. One of the reasons that we started AIR, which was just launched just a few years ago, is we had this really incredible breadth of activities related to the environment, but we needed a place that would really draw them in. And it's been under the aegis of some of you may remember the Institute on the Environment back in the day, to now what has become AIR. And we brought in a large collection of centers and institutes under this larger umbrella, so we can actually help to not only have a one-stop shop for research, but also to really take advantage of the unique breadth of activities. And some of those have resulted in some really interesting things. So recently, the Lovejoy Foundation gave a large donation to the University of Arizona to start the Lovejoy Center. It's got a long name and I'll forget it, but it's Bridging Biodiversity, Conservation, Science, and Policy for the full name. But that was really an indication of how the University of Arizona has embraced biodiversity and the kinds of work that's going on here. Recently, we received a $4 million grant gift to develop a postdoctoral program within AIR, and that's allowing us to, again, kind of dig in and create really interesting, unique research opportunities through the University of Arizona. Under Sharon's leadership, we have something called Arizona Environment, which is now a way for undergraduates to kind of see the full breadth of activities, and again, sort of a one-stop shop about the environment. And finally, we also have started this program, I'm going to mess up the name, it's called CARP, the Climate Adaptation Research Program, which is an investment from USAID to help develop support the next generation of researchers in developing countries. So again, you can see this wide breadth of activity that we're very proud of, but also hopefully will provide the backdrop for this amazing group of you coming here to work on resilience. So welcome. I hope it's a very wonderful and enriching experience, and I'll turn it back to Sharon. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elliot, and thank you for your continued support of our work. We really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Jacqueline for our first original musical composition.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here with you. My name is Chris Adarian, and I am a first-year master's student in the Applied Intercultural Arts Research Program here at the University of Arizona. And my primary interests are in ecomusicology, ecoacoustics, and climate change.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Barrios. I'm a graduate student in the Fine Arts College and in the interdisciplinary program.
And today we're sharing with you a collaborative work that we put together. It's going to be an audiovisual piece that is about climate futures and imagined futures, thinking about our home here in Tucson and what that might look like in the next, 100 years or so. There is no specific time for this or time scale for this piece. But yeah, just thinking about where life and culture will be and how we take care of each other and how we show up for each other and how we navigate a changing future here in our unique climate and environment. Thank you. Please enjoy. Oh, sure.
Quickly, yeah, so I'm using a photographic process, an alternative photographic process called luminography, which we're using organic materials, using the sun to create images on photographic paper. So you're going to see native plants from Tucson animated.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My goodness, we are blessed this morning with a mostly overcast sky. A welcome sign after nearly 3 summers without monsoons. The air is muggy and thick, still hot, but a morning like this is welcome in late July. 5:47 a.m., 96 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity. I pray this one will be gentle. The 3 large cisterns on the property, long dry, grown, waiting to be fed, and we're all looking forward to the extra water. I see Pequeño crouching outside through the window. I watch him sneak 1, 2 tiny tomatoes from under the black shade cloth. Wild chiapas, blushing sunset from viney bushes. Mi hijo, protector of seedlings, how I see myself in you. I too found peace among plants in a world on fire. Mama had the most beautiful garden, planted in orange, upcycled hardware store buckets, lining the front patio and walkway up to our childhood home, a tiny little apartment in Midtown. She would get notices sometimes from the property managers, likening her glistening eggplants, zucchinis, and sunset-colored tomatoes, her favorites, to unsightly weeds, unkept, a nuisance. But since she was breaking no law, no contract, Mama would not stop growing, and with each notice, she would plant another pot of zinnias, erect another wood slat trellis to support her climbing beans, and teach her neighbors to do the same. Who could be angry rounding a corner to sunflowers? Would that not be an invitation? These days, I'm thankful that the city not only sees the value in, but encourages us to grow. Sonia in the unit directly behind us was just approved for an urban garden water credit, the latest in our building. This will give her and her family access to slightly more state water every month. I'm helping her and her 2 daughters build their first set of planters from old rusted metal bins and bright green pallets. With fresh food being so expensive, to be able to grow is a gift. My son is overjoyed to take them a tray of starts that he has been proudly nurturing in the tent in his bedroom for weeks now. Brown taparis and spotted cowpeas, lemon basil, chiltepines, and the next generation of Mama's wild Chiapas tomatoes. Our garden looks very different from Mama's. We have very few ornamentals. The fruits are smaller, and unlike her bushes, alive with humming and flashes of color from bees and butterflies, ours crawl mostly with small black ants. Sophisticated water irrigation systems supplied by government programs ensure that each plant receives only as much as it needs. And our hands are busied at dawn plucking and pollinating flowers from melons and squash. We grow our gardens in shady corners of the building and beneath old carports crowned with solar panels. This evening, we'll take chilled melon soup and broad beans to Demaya's. Hector said he bought some blue corn flour at the Sunday market, and tonight we will teach the children to make tortillas. Stepping outside, a slight breeze winds through the curls at the nape of my neck, and my gaze shifts northward, up and past my son, the Catalinas, Babat Dawak, balding and scarred, shrouded in clouds. The trip up the mountain is slow, meditative. The gondola sways gently upon its ascent. 8:23 a.m., windy, gray. I gaze outward, projecting images of old photographs my uncle once took onto the landscape. Saguaro forest backlit by fiery sunsets, or foreground to a clear, starry night. The Milky Way stretching across the heavens. In the foothills, there are still saguaros, though they have started to thin, migrating higher where possible, scattered sparsely and mostly small without arms. Higher up there is grass and woodland of shrubby oak. The pines, sequestered to the peaks, like I feel, look tired and weary. Many are copper-toned from beetle infestation or blackened by wildfire. This is not the same wilderness my uncle explored when he was young. I understand why those who could afford to migrated up the mountain, a short ride away from the amenities of the city, but high enough so as not to suffer as much in the hotter months. Winters are mild and the snow does not stick for long. There is a risk of fire, certainly, but enormous amounts of time and money have been spent to reduce the risk near the village. I keep a bike parked a short walk from the gondola station, the wind ripping through my hair is luxurious as I ride, passing through neighborhoods of sleek modern casitas and lavish gardens. It is quite different up here. Arriving at my uncle's door, my fingers tremble as I find the key. The door, creaking open, releases the scents of hardwood and dust. It's been 2 weeks since I've been here, the first time since he's passed. When I enter, the room is silent, liminal, cold, heavily defined by his absence. All that is left of him are his photographs mounted on the walls. I feel his spirit in cotton candy sunsets, in alpine meadows of lupin and giant ferns, a huddled pair of spotted owls, and ravens mid flight, in lightning ripping through purple sky. Then there are those of Emerson, sweet, warm smile, piercing eyes, seated cross-legged in the winding road flanked by pines, or on the doorstep, huddled in a blanket with a steamy mug of coffee. I miss them both so much. I miss the stories of chasing off bears from campsites in the middle of the night and of being caught backpacking in a storm, always told in the most hysterical way that only they could. I strive to love as much as they did. Thunder booms above the house, and I hear his voice, his laughter in it. I'll spend the night here, dreaming, weeping, praying. I turn the lights out and sit beside the window, waiting to catch the lightning. I should be getting home. 6:45 p.m., 103 degrees Fahrenheit, a sauna. But the sun will set soon. Aroma of creosote and petrichor hangs in the air, resinous, intoxicating. So far, only light drizzle on this side of town, but at the edges, the sky is black, ignited sporadically from deep within. State inspection days are challenging. Pulling reports, running efficiency tests, safety drills, licensing and compliance testing, everything always checks out. It simply has to. There are, of course, systems in place. Backup energy stored in critical centers and in homes and buildings themselves. Chances for error are extremely low. But we are no strangers to catastrophe. We haven't been for quite some time. I think I need a drink. Añejo, somewhat rare, expensive, hints of vanilla, spice, smoke, tepache, chiltepine, dandelion honey, twist of sour orange, small plate, blue corn tamal, amaranth pilaf, poached quail egg, tuft of micro radish. People are dancing. I tap my toe, shift my shoulders, bob my head. I should visit my brother in Denver, maybe early next spring. I could spend a week, take the train. The bar is candlelit. Soft LEDs glow around exits and illuminate frosted antique lamps. Ears muffled, people dancing become like ghosts, flickering in the low light. I close my eyes. Heat wells up in my chest. I remember the night the system failed. The hottest day ever recorded in Tucson, 126 degrees Fahrenheit. I remember sitting on the roof of my childhood adobe home, the vacuous space once occupied by the hums of AC units filled with exasperated sighs, panting, and the sound of my heart in my ears. Some people are weeping, some shouting at one another. Children are loaded into cars, AC blasting. The roads congested with vehicles trying to flee. But where to? Sirens, helicopter rotors, megaphones. That night, my family and my neighbors slept, or tried to at least, outside our homes under the same sweltering blanket of stars. We lost thousands that night, and in the days thereafter. Tonight, though, I'm thankful for tequila. Thankful for dancing and thankful for resilient systems, for human compassion and ingenuity, for quick, decisive, and collective action. I'm thankful for the opportunity to sit and enjoy a meal at the bar, to hear live music and to dance through the night if I'd like to. As I step outside, the sky in ecstatic sigh opens up a magnificent torrential downpour. People emerge from the bar and from every building up and down the street, drenched, crying out joyously and dancing in the rain. Warm rain, cool breeze, a welcome reprieve to scorching sun and suffocating nights. A great sense of ease fills the streets, and my heart is filled with the strength to go on.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was beautiful. So our work in air is closely tied with our community. And we have a wonderful example of a community organization focused on resilient watersheds with us today. Please welcome Lisa Shipek from the Watershed Management Group here in Tucson. And Lisa will introduce her guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's really wonderful to be here. So I want to call up the other people on the panel. So Katlo Shipek, one of the co-founders of Watershed Management Group, Katerina Sakoman, and Anthony Diaz-Vasquez. Come on up here. Good to see you too. I think we'll be all sharing a microphone. Is that just pass? So no, I think we can just pass the microphone. That will work. Hi, Anthony. Okay, have a seat. Okay, perfect. Thank you. We do have some slides. So Sharon reached out to me and asked for us to do this panel, and I was very excited to get the invitation. It's such an honor. Katlo and I are co-founders of Watershed Management Group. We are married, and we're a couple that met in Illinois, so we actually predated our organization. The organization came after. But we are graduates of the U of A, both did our master's here, and the other founders of Watershed Management Group also were involved with the U of A, so we have a strong connection to the university. At this point, the other co-founders of our organization have moved on to other places and other things. So at this point, it's Katlo and I involved still in the organization, as well as a really amazing group of staff and volunteers. And we have two of our past interns here to talk a little bit about our work. So Sharon was asking us to share a little bit about how we formed, why we formed. And so we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary last year. It's pretty amazing to think it's been 20 years. When we started, we were very young and very inexperienced and really had no idea what we were doing. But we had a lot of passion, and I'm happy to say the passion is still there. Obviously, we're still involved, and that's what motivates us every day to do this work, is the passion for the community work. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Katlo, or actually, if you want to, Anthony, to talk a little bit about some of the problems that we had seen that we were wanting to work on through our organization.
Testing. Great. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you all for the honor to be here today and share a little bit about our story. I grew up in Sierra Vista, just southeast of here, and interestingly, along a dying river. And so it was always kind of in the forefront of this is, an issue. And then I moved to Tucson, and before I even moved to Tucson, we used to joke as a family of all of those Tucsonans and Phoenicians are just crazy. And so then my mom moved to Phoenix, I moved to Tucson, and now I still think Phoenicians are crazy. I'm getting used to Tucson. I actually really like Tucson, but I think part of this was how do we commit ourselves to our community? And Tucson was becoming our community. Yet as students at the U of A, we hadn't really invested ourselves in the community. So our organization, our efforts were partly to how do we invest and commit ourselves to the resilience of our new community being Tucson. And so some of the problems I saw is I came from a community that was heavily investing itself in how to save a dying river. And I moved to a community with dead rivers, largely from overpumping of rivers. And then thinking about how are we extracting and importing from another dying river, the Colorado River. This is a hot city. We were joking about it in the 80s, and now it's what, 20, what is the year? 2024. I have to keep reminding myself it's even hotter, and largely due to not just climate change, but urban heat island. And I know many of you are also addressing that issue. And then thinking about the loss of riparian forests, it's like, where do we go to cool off, especially in the summer, as we were just kind of experiencing in the last art piece. And then thinking about all of the other issues from watershed pollution, I was in the watershed management program as a graduate student, so we were always focused on hydrology, erosion, sedimentation. And then I think the other piece was, where was the environment in the community? We had to go to the mountains to experience the environment. So how do we bring that back into our urban community?
Thanks, Catlo. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities we saw in the nonprofit work. We saw that there was already a community of people, a large community of people who really cared about the local environment. We're very connected to the Sonoran Desert. I think that's one of the things I most love about Tucson is that there's a strong sense of place, that we're in the Sonoran Desert. People really love native plants. There was a strong movement already afoot on water harvesting, thanks to efforts of people like Brad Lancaster, and very much a strong water conservation ethic. So that was already here, which made our work so much easier. There was already a community of people that was very interested in doing this work. And we saw that there was an opportunity to bring this work into more of people's day-to-day, to offer these types of simple practices through free educational workshops and community building platforms. So we saw that there was so many opportunities, that there's a willing community, that people are really interested in collaborating. So at more of an institutional level, that there's a lot of willingness and interest to collaborate as well. So very much a ripe community for the work that we were hoping to do. And how are we advancing slides? Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So when I was talking to Sharon and the purpose of today and the theme of resilience, I got very excited because the vision around resilience is something that we like to talk a lot about in our organization. So what is our vision for a resilient Tucson, Santa Cruz watershed? What does that even look like? So we also would like to start with our own land and water acknowledgement to ground us. So I think Katla is going to share that.
No, I think starting with the vision is somewhat looking back and gaining inspiration from, especially those who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial and continue to steward them today. And so I think it's really important to ground ourselves, and it's good to always, I like to start with this, to ground myself and where are we coming from, where are we going to, and recognizing those of the that are in such our lands and waters have been stewarded by the Ho'okam, the Sopaipuri, and those of the Pascua Yaqui and Tohono O'odham today, and whose relationship with our watershed continues. And I think it's really important to look at, how are they continuing to steward these lands, and how do we build their capacity to help continue to steward these lands?
So we have set out a 50-year vision, which we did, I think, around 2014. Looking at our heritage. So considering our heritage, where we're coming from, and where would we really like to go in the future? So this 50-year vision is centered around restoring our heritage of flowing creeks and rivers in the Tucson area, and really visioning what that could look like, considering that we do have an urban area here, and we can't go back to what it was like in the past necessarily, but there's so many opportunities to develop a resilient watershed again. And really, that's a lot about restoring our connection, our groundwater to surface water connection. So when we think about restoring rivers, a lot of that work fundamentally is restoring groundwater levels, which we have seen happening here over the last few decades. And there's so many cases of hope around this work where we've seen some things, this turn around. While we've overpumped our groundwater, there are definitely ways to replenish those groundwater levels. And when you do that, flow returns. And we'd also like to see that our rivers, that we become a river-centric community. The whole reason Tucson is here is because of the river, because of the Santa Cruz River and its tributaries. So historically, our heritage is a river-centric community. So how can we refine that and really center our rivers as central to our livelihoods, to our economy, to our spiritual well-being? So that's our vision looking forward, and some of our short-term to long-term work all ties into this greater vision.
So for me, that means being hydrolocal, living hydrolocal. So at home, where I work, elsewhere in the community. And so to do that means also that we're not extracting or degrading other watersheds, other river systems, so we can live here more resilient, more sustainable. So I think partly is looking at what can we do here, at our own places, and how does that impact the larger region?
We did make up that word, by the way, but I hope you all adopt it. We want to hear everyone using that term hydrolocal. We were really looking for what a term that would be that, but there wasn't anything that we could find. So we just thought we'd come up with our own term. So what does hydrolocal look like? We've done a series of illustrations with a local artist on what that can look like at your own home. And these are the types of things that we teach and do with all ages, from school kids to green job professionals, to anyone who really wants to come out and learn. So things like rainwater harvesting and gray water harvesting, the different water conservation practices, but also thinking about green stormwater infrastructure and getting out and connecting to your watershed and helping clean up those areas.
So just making sure that we're being inclusive of our entire community. So recognizing that hydrolocal is boils down to the same thing, but may look different depending on how we're living, where we're living within our community, and what resources we have access to. But knowing that these are very simple practices that should be scalable, accessible, and approachable.
How many of you have been to the Living Lab? Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, if you haven't been, I invite you to come visit. You can get there easily from the U of A by bike or bus number 4, or you can drive there. And this is the space. It is about a half acre, was formerly residential properties. So the scale of the buildings on the property are very much residential in nature. So it's very accessible to what you could do at your own home. So we are really demonstrating what hydrolocal looks like here at our living lab. It's open Monday through Friday for people to drop in during the day. And then we have a bunch of evening and weekend activities as well. But essentially what we're demonstrating here is that you can harvest rainwater, use gray water, stormwater to meet all your water needs. We are very excited because all our tanks are like on the cusp of overflowing from all the rains we've been getting. So we have about 16,000 gallons of storage on our property, which we use for all purposes, including drinking.
I would just say if everybody brought over a gallon right now of rainwater, we could overflow our tanks. We're that close. So what does a hydrolocal city look like? And to me, this is where there's some folks here at the U of A that are working on this, looking at how do we be net zero? I like to even say net positive, right? So how can we make best use of our rainwater, stormwater, recycled waters, not just at home, but within our neighborhoods, sharing across our community so we can reduce and essentially end our reliance on extractive or imported waters. And so this is really going to take a community effort, of a collaborative effort. We can start at home, but really it's about collective to collaboration efforts.
Anyone know where this photo is? What creek are we looking at? Tanque Verde, yeah. And the mountains behind? The Rincon Mountains. So this is right in our own community. I just love this photo so much because sometimes we think about what's our mental picture of what our watershed is, right? When we close our eyes and have a mental picture of what our creeks are like, what our watershed looks like, what our riparian forest like, is this what comes up in your head? Hmm? Probably not for most people. That's why I like to put this photo up there to help show that this is our watershed. This is what our watershed would have looked more like in the past. More areas would have looked like this. This is an area, the Tanque Verde Creek on the east side, fed by primarily the Rincon Mountains, but a little bit of the Catalinas. And this area here is an area of shallow groundwater, so it still has connection. The groundwater levels are within 50 feet of the surface and still can support a riparian forest. At this point, riparian forests are pretty rare in the Tucson Basin. This is one of the few remaining areas where there's actually a riparian forest, and there's potential to bring this back. We have a heritage of a much larger riparian forest along the Tanque Verde, the Rito, and the Santa Cruz River in particular, and there's absolutely opportunity to restore this as part of our long-term resilience.
So with that is how do we maintain, preserve, protect, and enhance our riparian forests, and not just in the Tanque Verde, Sabino Creek, Rincon Creek, Cienega Creek, but extending it down the Rito, the Cañada de Oro, the Santa Cruz River. And these could be potential cooling corridors for our urban watershed, right? So you can often experience temperatures 20 degrees less in the summer just walking under this riparian forest. But a lot of it is making that connection to groundwater, restoring that connection to groundwater.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about impact. So how has our organization, this is a question that Sharon had prompted me on, how has our organization had an impact on the Tucson community, on the Santa Cruz watershed, on the San Pedro watershed and beyond?
So we like to start at our living lab. It's a place we invite everybody anytime during the week. We have free tours on the weekend. We even have a game on most Saturdays. How low can you go? So making hydrolocal real for a lot of folks, and they get to see it in practice at our living lab. But we have classes, we have events, we open it up to other communities to have meetings. And so it's really in part a demonstration, in part, just something that you can get your hands dirty on. Many of our classes are hands-on, so you're digging in the soil, you're looking and maintaining the composting toilets to learn about composting toilets, for example. We have over thousands of visitors a year, and all of that largely on making use of rainwater on site.
Okay, we're going to pass it to Anthony to talk a little bit about some of the work that they were involved in with Family Saturdays in the Living Lab.
Um, I'm from Puerto Rico, right? So there it rains a lot. And when I moved here, I mean, lack of water, like people started saying flush less. I started like looking at signs everywhere, U of A, no plastic around. So for me, that was very impactful or impacting. But Family Saturday um, helped me to gain more understanding and to be a more prolific, if that's a word that fits to the context, but in understand what was water in Tucson. So part of what Family Saturday is or still is that you bring families, and we do a bunch of activities. You will see cranky kids on a Saturday morning, their free time, but at the end they have fun with the chickens, walking around, doing activity. What is the workshop of the rock called?
Rock polishing?
Yeah, the rock polishing workshop. They do love that. And story time is something very influential in this kids, and before I left, one thing that I was trying to build was to bring more Hispanic families to this context, because the reality is the access is to white family, and it's because lack of English or stuff like that. So we started translating um, uh, things, and having a space for Spanish, and they started coming actually more and more. Also, they loved finding different things around the living lab, and creating like a competition. Also, it's also for young adults. It's not only for kids. It's a space where they can create more, or we can create more resilience and knowledge about the use of natural resources that we have around, I think, in Tucson. So yes, I think that's most of our Family Saturday.
Thanks, Anthony. And then I think we have the next slide. So if both of you wanted to speak a little bit to this, the internship and docent program, they'll primarily speak to the internship program, but we have this interesting multi-generational training session in every fall where we bring on all our interns and all our docents at the same time, and they join together in a series of Friday trainings. So the idea is we're bringing docents who tend to be on the older side, semi-retired or retired, and then our interns, which tend to be a little bit younger, all together, and it creates a really interesting learning environment. So if you all want to share a little bit more about the program.
Okay. Yeah, so the all the interns like work with a different staff member, so we had a whole bunch of different tasks. I did a lot of maintenance at the living lab, but there were some other people that were working on more like media and like outreach types of things. So there's a variety of that. And then yeah, the Friday classes it was a lot more like, the internship itself was more hands-on learning, and then the classes was more like lecture style learning, but we learned about like our trash use, and we learned about how much water, the toilet uses, the shower uses, all that stuff. So we could, ourselves make better water decisions, but it was like they were educating us so that we could make the decisions ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, hello. So I mean, adding to that also, I guess all the active Fridays activities and Saturdays also, like the beaver survey, for me that was very foundational, to notice that there's a lot of water around Tucson, and we didn't find any beaver that year, but we saw a bobcat, so I ran. But these kind of experiences, at least for me, in my personal opinion, they opened up a lot, right? And the aspect that I really love more about is building community among interns, and getting to know each other, I guess. I'm sure like every year there's a lot of people applying, but it's a wow moment for it was.
Yeah, okay. So part of I helped with the build your own basin workshops when I was doing my internship there. And so we did some like on site at the living lab. And the cool part, or the most exciting part to me, was that after everyone that attended could take home free trees and shrubs and grasses. And so they could build a basin in their own community. They could do it at their house. They could do it like in a park in the neighborhood, wherever they wanted. And so we did some some at the Living Lab. We did some in community events. We did one at a school, which was really cool. Some of them were by road so that we could focus on reducing flooding, and some were just in neighborhoods, communities that needed it. But I think that this is a really good example of something that's like really accessible to literally teach someone how to do it in an hour, and they can go home and do it themselves. They can rent tools for free. And I think that made it a lot more accessible and like less overwhelming than some of the other like more intensive classes.
Thank you, Kat and Anthony. They did an amazing job too. Like we really depend on our interns to get out and do these programs. And so they're not, sitting behind, the staff. They're out there doing these projects, doing the education, helping co-create and co-lead all of it. So they did an amazing job.
Another aspect of our organization is we do lead twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, a week-long water harvesting design certification largely geared towards professionals, educators, community leaders. I see some familiar faces in the room today who have gone through this course. We've been offering it since 2009, I think over 38 courses, over 400 certified water harvesting practitioners. Why we got started with this is one is we needed our own educators and we needed to train our educators. So this really started as a training program for our own staff or others we were working with. And now, since then, we now have Tucson Water sends almost all of their new conservation staff through this. We have a number of different landscaping businesses, not just here in Tucson, but all the way to Durango and Utah, who send their staff through this course. So it's really cool to kind of see this ripple effect that's gone not just within the Tucson community, but across the region.
The Santa Cruz Watershed Collaborative is an initiative that started in 2017. I'm wondering if anyone been involved in that, come out to any forums or participated? No? Okay, well, okay, lots of opportunity here. So this initiative started out of the desire to collaborate among a large number of institutions. So not only nonprofit organizations, but also government agencies. And the U of A has been involved with this. We've had various departments that have engaged. But essentially the idea is, how do we all work together towards a vision of restoring flows and watershed health? We all have a little piece of it, but what's going to bring us all together to have a bigger collective action? So it's been a really amazing collaboration, and I would invite you to learn more and participate when you can. I got the 1-minute warning. So we're almost done. River Run Network is, I would say, a concurrent effort where that started in 2016. Our grassroots initiative to engage community members in restoring our heritage of flowing rivers. And there's so many aspects to that, from invasive species removal in our rivers to helping restore groundwater levels to advocacy and policy work. And Catlo has a few more slides and we'll be done.
Currently, almost every Saturday from September through May, we currently are removing an invasive Arundo donax giant reed cane from the Tanque Verde Creek. We just got a grant from Arizona State Forestry to expand that across the Tucson Basin and collaborate with a number of other organizations as well. We have over 46 stations where we monitor flow water presence in our Tucson's creeks and rivers with, I think, currently 84 volunteer monitors. So we've been collecting data since 2016 on this program. And then if you're interested in beavers and hiking along a river, beautiful river, San Pedro River, come out March 2nd and 3rd. Join us for our binational annual beaver survey. We'll be doing the US section March 2nd and 3rd, and then we'll be partnering with Sonora-based partners on the upper San Pedro later in April.
Thank you again for inviting us here today. We look forward to partnering more with all of you. Come on to the Living Lab, learn about the Santa Cruz Watershed Collaborative, reach out to us. We love to partner on research projects too, but thank you again for the opportunity today.
Thank you so much, Lisa, Catlo, Kat, and Anthony. Really appreciate you being here. All right. We are now moving into our first round of short lightning talks. So we're going to have 6 presentations, one right after the other. And here's our list of presenters. So I will not be introducing each person individually. We're just going to keep it moving right along. So after these 6 presentations, we'll take a short 10-minute break. That will give you a chance to ask questions, provide comments to the speakers, and engage for just a short period of time. So without further delay, Andrea Gerlak. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I grew up in a family that talked politics, local elections, labor relations, international affairs, and it didn't take me long to start to see the connection between politics and the environment, especially around water. On the one hand, I have very vivid memories as a child of my mother boiling water in our kitchen for our drinking water, following some water quality warnings after the nearby river, the Susquehanna River, had some flooding issues in northeastern Pennsylvania where I grew up. But I also spent a significant amount of time as a child in the Southwest and really started thinking about what it's like to live in an arid climate. These experiences have influenced how I think about resilience. So today, as the director for the Udall Center for Studies in Public Policy, and as a professor in the School of Geography, Development, and Environment at the University of Arizona, when I think about resilience, I'm really thinking about the human dimensions, the people. And I'm especially intrigued about governance and how we build governance processes for resilience. And these are very inherently political questions because they're about who gets to participate and sit at the table, and they're about outcomes, who wins and who loses from governance practices. So what my thinking about governance is really about, my thinking about resilience is really about governance for resilience. And this is about building out and crafting governance practices that are nimble and agile and that can respond and be robust enough to respond to new social conditions, economic conditions, political, environmental conditions. So governance for resilience is very much about building linkages and networks and partnerships and having intentional learning and being able to adapt to change. The context for most of my work are these big international transboundary riversheds or watersheds. And, you know, more than half the people around the world live in a shared river or lake basin. Rivers and lakes, bodies of water really do not recognize our political boundaries. And so this poses a lot of really interesting political governance policy questions. I've been interested in understanding how countries negotiate and sign treaties to share their waters, and then how they implement or carry forth those treaties by creating organizations to manage those waters. And from that, it brings forward all these sorts of interesting governance questions about how information is shared and how science informs decision-making and how stakeholders are engaged. Through my research and my activities around the world with my collaborators, we've been able to draw some really interesting lessons. Through our research, for example, in the Uruguay River Basin in South America, we've been able to study a long-term conflict between Uruguay and Argentina about some water pollution issues, and it led to a great deal of activism and conflict in the basin. And we were able to study how the organization there responded and how it operated. And you wouldn't be surprised to know, but how they design the organization really impacts the job it can do, how effective it is, and what its performance is. And so in this case, we were really able to bring forth these findings about the role of sharing science in a participatory way and engaging stakeholders before a conflict erupts. In fact, in order to build trust and capacity and all the things you need to be able to collaborate. I've also led an interdisciplinary team of researchers and practitioners in other parts of the world to study Europe's Danube River, Asia's Mekong River, and the shared waters, and there are many of them, between the US and Canada. And in that work, we've really looked at knowledge gaps and how gaps in our scientific understanding can really limit how decision-making happens. And so we've been able to see how missing data, incomplete data, failure to harmonize data can really limit governance. You wouldn't be surprised to know that these lessons really can impact us here at home, and we can see how they play out in the Colorado River Basin. We've studied the relationship between the US and Mexico over the last 100 years and how they've collaborated around water. And we've also studied a number of collaborative programs that are in the basin around salinity, dam management, and endangered species like these guys here. And in that work, we've really been able to uncover a lack of representation of diverse interests and ideas and ways of knowing in the basin. So in many ways, our approach to governance on our basin here at home has been really reactionary and fragmented, and it hasn't reflected governance for resilience. It hasn't been equitable, participatory, and it doesn't see the basin as a whole. So we think there's a lot we can learn from other parts of the world that can inform our decision making here. I'm optimistic. There's a lot of working people in this basin and smart people really working hard to try to solve some of these governance issues. They do it with a lot of intentionality and a lot of humor. And so thanks for having me today.
Hello, my name is Sawyer, and I got the incredible opportunity to be a part of this year's Earth Grant cohort. I'm an intern with the Sonoran Institute on their marketing team, and I'm also an undergrad student here studying neuroscience and cognitive science and minoring in Spanish studio art and sociology. My dream as a kid was to be a published author. I'd create fantastical stories in my head, very loosely based on reality, making them as detailed as I possibly could in order for my depictions and ideas to be understood. I was convinced that Scholastic would come knocking on my door, asking to publish my book. I'd become the youngest published author, my books would be in Barnes & Noble, they would sell out, people would be begging me to finish the next in the series, I'd never have to go to school again, yada yada. I never actually made it past the second page of writing, but that's besides the point. Even as children, stories have incredible meaning to us. At that age, I was making up stories on the playground, imagining my friends and I were horses or something crazy like that. I remember writing fictional stories about my frustration and my emotions, giving them to my parents, hoping that they would understand how my fictional book related to my obnoxious younger brother. My entire life was surrounded by narratives, both ones I was making up and the ones I was choosing to tell. Now, we don't need neuroscience to tell us that stories and narrative are how people make meaning of the world. It's how we interact with one another, it's how we learn, it's how we engage with and feel the world around us. But it does help strengthen that idea by telling us that our brains literally mirror that of the speaker we are listening to, as our neurons fire in the same patterns when we are listening to a story. There's both an intense emotional but also physiological connection when it comes to storytelling, and the power of change lies in that connection. I'm studying cognitive science to examine just that. I'm fascinated by what makes us who we are. What combination of genetic makeup and environmental context informs our understanding of ourselves? And how do we as social beings influence each other? I found myself in this environmental space with curiosity, wanting to look at how people learn and take in information around them, and how they use that knowledge to form the very narratives that make us individual humans. I'm a researcher at heart. I like hard facts, numbers, real, tangible data. I love asking questions. I love searching for answers, and I really love getting those answers. And while this is so important for the scientific fields that many of us are involved with, there is something so critical about social research and the need to connect with people. There's a sense of personality that exists within opinions, and consequently that needs to be considered within research. With this internship, I've watched the way that people interact with the environment. For some, their relationship with nature is intimate, one that they treasure in isolation, sitting on a Santa Cruz riverbank listening to the bugs. For others, it's a relationship that they share with others, beckoning the group to come look at the native dragonfly they're holding, or telling me all about their favorite fish species. People create narratives that position themselves in nature according to their lived experiences. In this way, our narratives are never solely our own. Our entire lives and beings are shaped by the world around us. From the places we grew up and spent our childhood, to the people that we are surrounded by, to the media that we choose to consume, relationships and social interactions are what build us as people. In every one of my stories, I built my characters around people I already knew. The dialogue reflected that of the adults in my life. Their interests were those of my friends. I took the experiences that I was living and molded them to fit my new characters. Nothing was my own, and yet everything was. Being able to work with the Sonoran Institute has taught me more about that influence than I ever would have known through research alone. My job centers around the idea of getting more people to engage with our story in order to support the work that we do, and therefore the entire concept of conservation. I've told my story at events, explaining to people why I'm here, and I've listened to their stories, learning about what brings them into the space that we share. I also find new audiences for the Sonoran Institute's narrative by working on our social media with photographs, videos, stories, and artwork. It's too easy to gloss over art and stories as tangential to what really moves and changes the world. Much easier to view science and technology as doing the heavy work of progress. But humanity only really moves forward when a group of people see a common goal to struggle towards. And art and stories are incredibly powerful ways to bring people together. That emotional connection can be the first step towards coalition and ultimately towards sparking change. It was Thomas Moran's artwork and William H. Jackson's photographs that helped convince Congress that the Yellowstone landscape was worth protecting. And in 1996, it was Testimony, a book of stories and essays that were presented to Congress to communicate the personal, spiritual, and historical significance of our public lands in an effort to persuade them to protect the Red Rock space in Utah. My work at Sonoran Institute has actually highlighted for me the intersection of my interests in art, sociology, and cognitive science. I'm interested in how individuals make decisions and how the context of their lives, the people, cultures, stories, and even art influence those decisions. Being conscious of the story you are writing and the narrative you are telling can have an incredible impact on others and bring about beneficial connections and change for us all.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm really excited. I'm a faculty in the Nutritional Sciences and Wellness School in KL's Agriculture, Life, Environmental Sciences. And I was thinking about resilience and the question, and how does my work intersect with that? And I think it began at a cellular level, metabolic resilience and how our physiology is resilient. And I study diabetes and prevention of diabetes and how health promotes that, and health promotion and behavior support that. So I'll tell you just a little bit about what we're working on right now in these next few minutes. When I first started studying this area in nutrition science, and I'm a dietitian, so I'm interested in helping people make changes to their health and their diet behaviors, and specifically, I learned a lot about human behavior and how to change it, and why people do what they do when it comes to food. And then I realized after a while, this was only a very small part of the whole picture here. And so I think the idea of resilience also extends to what I work on now, which is having to do with communities and how communities and the environment writ large, broadly defined, support health or don't sometimes, and how can we change that? So really my work has expanded much beyond the drivers of health that you see circled here, the health behavior, which is a very small proportion, significant, but smaller, of what influences us to more environmental and some of the clinical spaces that we intersect with too in our lives. So my work has been focused for the last probably 8 years, 10 years on understanding diabetes. And it affects about 10% of the US population, maybe even a little bit more than that here in Arizona. And it's a very debilitating condition. It's very expensive. It's very burdensome for the individual experiencing it, and challenging to medically manage. So prevention is the key. How do we do that effectively is a big unanswered question that we're grappling with. Here, this visualization here is all about the intersection of diabetes with food insecurity. So there is a relationship between those things, and that's something that my work bumped up against maybe about 6 years ago now or so. We had an intervention project in the community. And it became very clear that the recommendations that we were giving to people about changing behaviors and diet in particular were not achievable. And it was because people did not have access to enough of the right kind of food, and right is kind of in quotes here, but nutritious food to eat, and could not make those changes that we were recommending. So having to look at that, a close look at that, was really important. And the prevalence of food insecurity is a lot higher than maybe you would imagine, affecting about 1 out of 6 people here in Pima County, and a lot of them children and households that are headed by single individuals. So, and the elderly as well. So there are certain vulnerable populations. Diabetes and food insecurity also impact minoritized populations a lot higher rates than non. So here, when I think about my work, I always want to ground myself in thinking about the root causes of health disparities and of disparities in diabetes and food insecurity. And so that's really where I've been in that space with community partners, trying to figure that out and address that as the fundamental cause, structural cause of a lot of our health conditions today. So thinking about that, I always encourage my students and colleagues to think about that as well. And so really moving away from health as a personal choice certainly is. What you do with your body is a choice, but there are so many layers to that and influences on that that are beyond the individual, that it's not really doesn't really make a lot of sense to focus on that. So all of the community work and initiatives I do are about these root causes. This is how we're thinking about the relationships between food insecurity and health right now. So thanks. It's a vicious cycle in some cases here of if you are food insecure, you have to use certain coping strategies. People make these trade-offs between going to the doctor, for instance, and having enough food to eat, which shouldn't be the case. And so we're trying to address those coping strategies, again, working on root cause, the fact of access and availability and people's opportunities to eat healthy, and address those things first. And there's 2 concepts related to that make this work really timely. And one, they're national conversations that are happening right now. And one is that the idea of food insecurity has really moved to more of a conversation about nutrition security. So it's not just access to enough food. It's, again, this nutritious food that's going to help you promote health, prevent disease. And so that's one thing that's happening. The second thing that's happening, which is an opportunity as well for us, is this food as medicine approach. And this is something that are these structural programs and community-based programs that are happening, but that are embedded within, have the opportunity to be embedded within healthcare systems in ways that haven't been before. So we have these things happening over here, there's healthcare systems over here, never the two shall meet. And so working more on my end to work with our local federally qualified health centers and other healthcare organizations to embed more with food systems and community food banks, for instance, and pantries in ways that help connect patients with this fundamental thing that they need to manage their health. And there's different levels to that we work at. And then finally, we have an initiative here at University of Arizona that is this umbrella initiative. It involves partners from across the campus, and it is integrating the idea of not just nutrition science and culinary techniques, but all those things together, helping empower people in making choices for themselves and preparing food in ways that are sustainable for them, that it is budget conscious for them. A lot of our recommendations aren't always kind of aware of that as much as possible, culturally responsive. And then most importantly, working with our community partners to ensure that what we're doing is this community engaged approach. So that what we're suggesting is the university is not, is in line with what they're expecting and what they need and what they want. And so I welcome all of you to reach out to me. And my colleagues, we're in the libraries, we're in Cooperative Extension, College of Medicine Phoenix right now, and CALS, but we'd love to be beyond that. And we have a lot of community partners with whom we work on this initiative. So if any of this sounds exciting, then please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Wilson, and I serve as Assistant Director, Admin Operations for the School of Geography, Development, and Environment. I come today dressed in the gifts of Indigenous communities and peoples to share my thoughts on the concept of resilience, specifically my thoughts on what resilience should not continue to be. Before I begin, I would like to officially introduce myself the way in which my Indigenous community has taught me. So, Yat E, She'e, Nicholas Wilson, and Shea, Sanjakin Nishle, Tabaha Bashichin, Tachini Dashiche, Adoashin Dashinole, Akut Ego de Nishle, Tucson, Arizona, Est Ne, Bicon, Arizona, de Nasha, Ahiahat. For those of you who do not speak Diné Bizad or Navajo, On the screen is an English translation of what I've shared as my Indigenous introduction. It actually acknowledges all of my relations, including the lands that I currently reside in, but also where I emerged. It also acknowledges that I'm an Indigenous Diné male-bodied being with historic, modern, and postmodern intergenerational settler colonial trauma and lived experiences. Finally, it acknowledges that I am a struggling to survive Indigenous scholar in the academy, given that I'm a sixth-year PhD student in the University of Arizona Center for the Study of Higher Education. Having properly introduced myself, I will now turn to offer some important context before speaking on what resilience should not continue to be. For more than 500 years, the Indigenous peoples of the Americas have had to cope with the forced assimilation and acceptance of non-Indigenous ways of knowing, understanding, and being, while also learning how to survive an ongoing genocide. Additionally, we have been forced to migrate and relocate our people and also deal with ongoing land and resource theft orchestrated through settler colonial governance, treaty making, and inequitable federal, state, and local law and policy making decisions and discussions. If that was not enough, we have also had to learn how to cope with Indigenous vanishment and erasures from our own lands. And since contact more than 500 years ago, we've had to deal with murdered and missing Indigenous relations. Despite these ongoing settler colonial atrocities, Indigenous peoples continue to endure. In short, we've had no other choice but to become resilient peoples. Although Indigenous peoples continue to demonstrate resilience in the face of ongoing settler colonial occupation, resource depletion, and colonization, it's important to ask, should we have to? Given this, I conclude by offering what I believe resilience should not continue to be. First, resilience should not continue to be a quick and easy solution to deal with and or address climate change, environmental destruction, and diminishing water resources. Second, resilience should not continue to be a means for underwriting settler colonialism and its ongoing land and resource theft from Indigenous peoples. Finally, resilience should not continue to be a label applied to the Indigenous peoples who have and continue to be excluded from ongoing policy development and discussions. I close by asking for your assistance. On behalf of the Indigenous communities, peoples, and the seventh generations yet to come, I ask for your acknowledgement of our own Indigenous sovereignties, rights, voices, and lived experiences. Additionally, I ask for your acknowledgement in honoring our own sovereign right to reestablish and remember our own ways of knowing, understanding, and being in kinship with all forms of land and life. Finally, I ask for a lived reality for Indigenous peoples that does not include our continued loss, and for the ongoing comfort and well-being of non-Indigenous peoples and their settler colonial empires. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken with all of you, and blessings to all my relations.
Hello, everyone. I'm very thrilled to be here with all of you. My name is Karina Martinez, and I'm a graduate student at the Harland's Resource Sciences program. My research has been focused on tracking indoor temperatures over the summer months in the city of Tucson, and as well as identifying what mitigation strategies are the residents using in order to cope with extreme heat. This research is particularly relevant given the extreme heat events that the city has experienced in the past years. July 2023 was actually the hottest month on record for the city of Tucson. And during the hottest week of that month, unfortunately, we lost 21 lives. And the most striking part of this is that actually 52% of those deaths actually occur while being indoors. Many of us tend to believe that being in our homes while extreme weather events occur will actually keep us safe. Unfortunately, that's not the reality for many of our residents in this city. For some, remaining at home can actually be more dangerous. However, resilience isn't just about individual actions. It's more about collective collective efforts in order to create more resilient communities. In response to these new challenges, there are new collaborations forming in the city of Tucson, inspired by initiatives like the Tucson Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, as well as the addition of the first Chief Resilience Officer in the city of Tucson. And I believe that these bold steps are actually paving the way into creating a more climate resilient city. Looking into the future, resilience for me takes on a whole new meaning. It goes from being, just surviving the extreme weather events that occur into creating more livable spaces where every single member of our community can actually thrive. Of course, in order to this to occur, we actually need to listen to the voices of the most vulnerable members of our communities, and ensuring that every single coping strategy is not just effective, but actually accessible for all of us. In my work on resilience, I've learned that seeking different perspective is very important, and not to just rely on traditional sources of information. And the most important thing is that we need to listen to the voices of the most vulnerable members of our communities. Those members who often fall through the cracks in our systems. And by centering all of our work in their experiences, we can actually develop solutions that can truly develop and make a difference and also change lives. The extreme heat event that we experienced last year underscored the need for more effective heat resilience measures for our city. As we move forward, please let us continue to prioritize resilience, ensuring that our cities and communities are well equipped to thrive in the face of climate change. Thank you.
Great. I'll go ahead and begin. I'm a global historian, a global environmental historian, and ethnohistorian specializing on the history of ecological imperialism. And I want to acknowledge also my many interdisciplinary and intercultural sources of information and collaborators. My central argument here, introducing you just to a piece of my research and our research, is that the history of Rapa Nui has often been told as an environmental parable. It's a tale of ecocide, collapse, and loss. This history looks very different, though, when we center it on its first people's own perspectives, experiences, and historical memory. It becomes an incredible tale of survival, adaptation, and resilience. You probably know the place I'm describing in the middle of this earth-eyed view of the planet as Easter Island. It has been known by a series of names since the island's initial settlement around 800, perhaps 1,000 years ago. What's Easter Island best known for? You've heard of this place, of course. Those big stone moai. Why did the Rapa Nui stop building them? What happened to them? Oh, that's a mystery. No, it's not. Maybe they ran out of trees and rope to move them around. But what happened to the trees? Rapa Nui cut them all down? In short, some people would like to tell you that Rapa Nui committed ecocide. That's the word they use. Something we may be in the process of doing to our home planet. Scientists like to believe that they came up with this idea themselves based on physical evidence. But I'd like to read here a translated excerpt from 2 letters written by the very first Christian missionaries to Rapa Nui from 1866 that reveals a deeper origin. Quote, In former times, there were palm trees and palm nuts from what can be remembered by the old ones that were seen on the heights. It's absolutely right. The mission came to establish itself at the very moment when their work of destruction had reached its ultimate limits, destruction of the material and moral order. In another time, this island had a beautiful vegetation, now annihilated, of which some traces still remain. Not even one tree is to be seen. The instinct of destruction appears to be, along with thievery, the dominant characteristic of the Rapa Nui, end quote. The Rapa Nui at that time had their own colorful names for the cross-wearing criminal who originated these ideas. Mata Mingo Mingo, wrinkled eyes. Pito Iti, the little stinker, and Areo Reo, the liar. A number of researchers have been working to undermine and to revise this just so story of human-induced environmental collapse. One of them is U of A archaeologist Terry Hunt. Maybe he's here today. But many have made the mistake, as they're trying to revise this, of relocating the supposed collapse of Rapa Nui society and culture from ancient to modern times, often treating the Rapa Nui people as if they had all disappeared. There are almost 10,000 Rapa Nui living in the world as we speak, around 4,000 of them on the island of Rapa Nui. So the way we tell these histories, emphasizing collapse versus resilience, has enormous political implications. My second argument here is that the Rapa Nui, the island itself has experienced many colonizations over its past millennium of history. One of the worst has been the appropriation of its history by outsiders, such as myself, in a well-meaning effort to critique our own industrial capitalist civilization. Our contention here, though, is we can learn a great deal from the Rapa Nui themselves regarding what happened, both in the distant and the recent past. Now here's a view looking up from Mangariva or nearby Rapa Nui 800 years ago. Circa 1910, about a dozen Rapa Nui lived in a leper colony. They were interned there, just north of the island's main town. This depressing locale was actually a haven for the perpetuation of Rapa Nui traditions and historical memory. It was the center of a circle of old ones, Korahua, who wanted to preserve and pass on their own knowledge for posterity. We've reconstructed the biographies of over a dozen expert knowledge keepers belonging to this loose circle, who shared a great deal of information with the British anthropologist Catherine Routledge when she visited in 1914-15, now in the Royal Geographical Society in London. The most respected member of this circle of elders was Pu'arahoa. He related an intricately detailed history of how their ancestors originally settled the island, written down in Rapa Nui, by the Rapa Nui, for the Rapa Nui. Among many things, this text provides precise navigational instructions, which have been proven to work, by the way, describing how to follow the stars, winds, and ocean swells to this, quote, little speck of land. Some of these are illustrated here along the beautiful road, the Milky Way, pointing in the east-southeast direction toward Rapa Nui from their likely original homeland. I'd love to tell you a lot more about this. This would be a great planetarium presentation here on campus. The fact that this knowledge still exists at all, centuries after the last ancient voyagers set sail from other Polynesian islands to reach this furthest extremity, is a remarkable testament to the resilience of Rapa Nui environmental knowledge and historical memory. Couple more sentences. There's more, much more. We describe and model how the ancient Rapa Nui used the single most abundant resource on their island, volcanic stone, to protect their crops and reliably increase their yields. We know from many lines of evidence that severe La Nina droughts were the greatest recurrent threat to their food supply, including a 150-year drought during the global little ice age that probably played a big role in the ending of the Moai building era. But also, there was a punishing multi-year La Nina drought from 1860 to 63. And we know this from Rapa Nui knowledge keepers themselves, from the Rapa Nui historians, that convinced 500 Rapa Nui to board Peruvian ships to go to the coast of Peru to serve as migrant farm workers on cotton plantations, while we were fighting a war over cotton and over slavery, all of which helped set in motion a cataclysmic disaster involving slave trading, smallpox, tuberculosis, murder, and the aforementioned arrival of those missionaries. The fact that these details are remembered at all through such horrific disasters, and I'm amazed by both the emotion, the poetic nature of this, and then the awful description of the year names that go along with the Rapa Nui chronology of years that we've reconstructed. These details provide potent testimony to the resilience of Rapa Nui historical memory and the culture to which it belongs. In fact, Pu'arahoa himself served as Tangata Manu in the year Otipiro, when the Rapa Nui plotted the downfall of the great stinker, Piro Piro, after chasing the first missionaries away. Indeed, the last of the birdmen, the last of the Tangata Manu of old Rapa Nui, are exactly these perpetuators of knowledge to our time in this community at that leper colony. Theirs is an ongoing story of tenacity, triumph, and rebirth, not a defeat, through the many colonizations of Rapa Nui. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you all. Thanks to our speakers. We're going to take a quick 7 or 8 minute break. Please return at 2:35. I think I have a slide. Amanda's changing those. Please return at 2:35. We'll do a quick little icebreaker activity and networking activity, and then move into our next set of activities, set of talks. Thanks so much. Of this. Thank you. Part of the goal of this afternoon is for us to get to know each other a little bit better so that we might start to form the basis for working together on some of these exciting collaborations that are so obvious. I just was talking to Mark Van Dyke and he came up and said, we're doing so much in engineering that relates to what you're talking about. We would really love to work more closely together. So that's exactly the kind of outcome that I'm hoping for through this afternoon of activities. So what I'd like you to do is pull out your device, go to pigeonhole.at, just type that in, or you can scan this QR code. Pigeonhole.at, and then you will enter the passcode capital ENR2. I have to pull mine up here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm the event coordinator for AIR. So I'm just going to provide some further direction here. Once you have entered into Pigeonhole, this is how it'll look either on your laptop device or on your mobile phone. In the upper right-hand corner, we would like to ask that you do input your name. So you can say that you're anonymous, but in certain parts of the activities, but here we would just like you to add your name and no need to add your email so you won't get spammed. So once you do add your name, you can go back after saving it. And then this is just an overview of how these activities will work. Sharon will guide you through them. We have 3 questions and then a final activity to end this portion. But when we go into each of the questions, you're going to enter into the discussions, and we have questions posed at the top or prompts. And in the text box is where you can enter your first answers, and then you're welcome to comment on other answers that other folks have provided. You can upvote them as you'd like. The first 3 questions are just warm-up activities. If you have any questions on how to use the platform, please raise your hand. I can go to you. And if there's anyone else in the ops team that can raise their hand. Okay, none of my team is here, but it's all good. You can come find me or just raise your hand and then I'll come to you and I will assist you.
Okay, so the first question is, what is one thing you do well? Again, this is just meant to be fun. You can put anything you like in there. Enter your answer. So you can type it in and then press submit. And we'll all be able to see your answers. I love it. And if you like somebody's answer, you can add a comment, you can upvote it, whatever you prefer to do. Okay, let's move on to the second question. One word that describes what you hope to get out of today. What's one word that you hope to get out of today? And this will show up for us as a word cloud, which you'll be able to see. Thank you, Amanda. And the third question is inspired by the book review section of the Sunday New York Times, which I always read, where they ask the author, 3 people living or dead they might want to have dinner with. I'm shortening this. One person living or dead that you'd like to have lunch with. These are fun. Okay, so that was kind of your warm up. And again, you'll be able to see what your colleagues and peers wrote. These will be up here throughout today that you can look at. And now I want to move on to maybe a more serious question. This exercise is called the reciprocity ring. And so it's reciprocity in that you will be both giving and receiving in this exercise. You will be both asking and answering a question. So the question that you will pose is intended to be something about resilience-related collaborations across the campus. So if you go into that question, if you click on enter your Q&A, you can enter a question, and then you can also respond or comment on other people's questions. So a question, an example question that I might have would be, what knowledge and experience do you have with resilience in the context of mining operations in Arizona? This is something that we've kind of been thinking about and talking about within AIR. I'd love to know what experience and knowledge people around campus have around doing resilience-related work with mining operations. So that's going to be the question that I enter. So if you're Chris Castro and you have experience in that realm, you're going to respond to me and tell me what you're doing related to resilience in mining. So please take some time. You have about 9 minutes or so to enter a question, to read other people's questions and respond to their questions. And in this way, we begin to form this ring of knowledge, this reciprocal ring of knowledge around questions and answers. If you are struggling with the app, please let one of us know, but we'll just give you a few minutes to spend some time doing that. And again, here, it's nice if you write your name so that we know who to go to that has that knowledge and expertise and experience that we're looking for. If you're not comfortable writing your name, you don't have to, but that kind of helps people connect with each other. You may also talk out loud if you want. We have just 3 or 4 more minutes left for this part. We are going to be talking about these questions and answers a little later in today's program. So if you have a chance, go ahead and add some comments, answer some of these questions. These are really great questions. So you can either upvote and say basically that you like that question. You can add an answer or a comment to any of the questions. That will help out your colleagues. All right, as I said, we'll have some opportunity to talk about these questions and answers later today, but I'm really pleased now to introduce Sarah Fraker, and she will be presenting an original musical composition. Sort of, she says. Okay, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. So I am a faculty member in the School of Music, and I need a little bit of instruction first. Okay, great. So just really going to talk about my ideas about eco music as reciprocity, designing meaningful art science collaborations. I am an orchestral musician by training, so I've played in the Tucson Symphony Orchestra for 19 seasons now, but part of my work here at the U of A involves commissioning original pieces, and I've chosen to design collaborative projects that especially explore connections between music and ecology. So these are the pieces I'm going to highlight today. Real quick, braiding was, I'll just go through here. Here we go. Braiding was a composition for oboe electronics and natural sounds by composer Asha Srinivasan. And I reached out to Rappenwall Kimmerer in 2014, quite a while ago, and I just sort of cold called her and said, would you be interested in working on this weird oboe project, and she magically said yes. And she came here to campus for a couple days and for the premiere, and we spent some time here on campus and also at Telnautham Community College. And in her pre-concert dialogue with the composer, she had these words that have really been sort of a guiding light to me. She said, because it is that give and take, isn't it? That reciprocity between human beings and the rest of the world that we have forgotten. And it leaves us lonely in the world. We lonely for them, they lonely for us. And it seems to me that art is a way to reknit that relationship, that we come to know each other again, the living world, and ourselves as part of that living world. And my audio didn't quite work out for the PowerPoint, so we're just going to move on from there. So the next piece is it's a commission called White Sand and Gray Sand, and this began as a little piece based on a folk song, and the composer evolved it into an ode to caliche and limestone and a meditation on gratitude for the land. All these are on YouTube if you're interested. So the next piece is a project called Pine Chant, and it was created in collaboration with the Laboratory of Tree Ring Research here at the U of A, and it uses tree ring growth data from Arizona trees to control various musical parameters. And I understand this piece as a sonic embodiment of the lived experience of these 12 trees, as well as an emotional response to climate crisis. And this is actually a work where I'm going to be able to share an excerpt with you. It's a scrolling score video, and when you see the video, you're going to see the score going by, and that's actually the score that we read from. It needs to be in this format because the composer's integration of tree ring data made it impossible to read in standard meter and notation. And I just want to point out at the end of the piece, you're going to hear just basically the last half of the piece. And at the end of the piece, you'll hear the distant voice of the oldest tree in the data set from 1772. And this is when I need YouTube help. So thank you very much for listening to our piece. So just to finish with things that I'm excited about, thinking about resilience, art as reciprocity, designing art science collaborations with deep and specific integrity, research experiences that take me into new landscapes and new fields of knowledge beyond music, making music that makes an emotional impact with new audiences, and in a field that fixates on national and I need another slide. National and international reputation. I'm excited about the rootedness of art making as a hyper local practice. And the new project that we're working on, in fact, it's inspired by WMG and it's called Hydro Local Music for the Santa Cruz River Watershed. And shameless self-promotion, once every 2 years, I give a solo recital and I'm giving a solo recital tonight. So if you're at the, yeah, so I'm gonna jet off, but thank you so much for having me. I didn't know about the WMG collaboration. That's kind of serendipitous. Cool. All right, so we are ready for our next round of inspirational short presentations. All right, so this is our list of presenters. And as before, I'm just going to let each speaker come up as they go. I'll give you a 1-minute card when you've got 1 minute left. And I'm pleased to welcome Marc Verhougstraete as our first speaker.
Hello, everybody. So I'm here today to introduce the topic of water and health and how we're paving the future by building resilience in both. So let's jump in. Water and health are intricately connected. They build the backbone of communities around the world. Access and clean water are not just a human right. They are the cornerstone for health resilience. So living in the Southwest United States, we hear all the time about water quantity. It's in our face, but I'm here today to talk to you about a bigger picture, a water crisis at the global scale that goes beyond water security. Billions of people around the world lack access to potable water. Exposure to water contamination causes diseases such as dysentery, typhoid, and cholera to spread around the world. Global estimates for this year alone top 4 billion cases of waterborne diseases. And this is going to lead to 3.5 million deaths. Persistent exposure to contaminated water causes increased adverse health outcomes, malnutrition, and persistent poverty. This is a global scale that requires our collective action and attention. And while the global burden seems staggering from a public health standpoint, the United States is not immune. We have millions of Americans who still lack access to clean water in their homes. Waterborne disease outbreaks in the United States tops 9 million cases every year, and that's from drinking water systems alone. This, when lack of access to water continuously degrades our health systems and leads to disparities in our health. And this is especially true in our rural communities. Rural communities have worse water quality than our urban centers for many reasons. One of those is that they rely solely on groundwater that is poorly regulated across the United States, often consumed without treatment, and rarely tested for contaminants. In Arizona, 20% of our population relies on about 100,000 domestic wells for their sole source of water in the home. Unfortunately, 31% of those wells, when tested, will test positive for at least one US EPA health-based standard failure. And this is especially problematic for our rural communities because they have a lower access to healthcare and they're experiencing a growing disease burden. So how do we turn the tide? Well, we start by building water resilience. And that is, we start by protecting access, providing sustainable water sources, and ensuring there's equitable access to safe water for everybody. And that's easy to forget when we're in the Southwest, constantly experiencing water quantity issues. The focus of resilient communities and resilient waters has to have an emphasis on health. The College of Public Health has teamed up with the Arizona Centers for Rural Health, and we are linking scientists and clinicians working in the same communities. Our team, our interdisciplinary team in the Southern Arizona Okay, so our interdisciplinary team working in Southern Arizona on the Healthy Stomach Project are collecting social and environmental determinants of health to identify which communities and which populations are exposing or are at high risk for waterborne disease. We take this data and then we give that to our health clinicians to improve personal health care. This is leading to improved targeted health screenings. This is leading to better disease treatment, lower disease burden, and ultimately helping us understand the water and health nexus in rural communities. Now imagine if we can integrate that health and water resilient approach at the state, at the national and the global levels. This is a really great opportunity and a powerful cycle where water quality data informs health assessments, where disease prevalence informs environmental assessments. We have that blueprint for water and health resilience in our graphs. We have a plan for this now. We can tailor water treatment and healthcare to every single individual. And by doing that, we can reduce the waterborne disease burden throughout Arizona. By doing this approach, we can have a resilient future from a water and a health standpoint for our most vulnerable communities in Arizona and around the world. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to hold this. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Barrios, and I'm an assistant professor of public and applied humanities. I'm a scholar of stories of place and how these two things create something quite simple, yet central, I will argue, to the production and experience of resilience, and that is a sense of belonging. In my work and projects, I theorize the concept and method of what I call emplaced reading, a way of interpreting texts from canonical literature to neighborhood stories that oppose forces of displacement and erasure. To belong, I argue, we need communal experiences of embodied understanding, historical interconnectedness, and speculative imaginations about the places in which we live. To do this, I draw from a blended toolkit from my training in the urban humanities, which fuses approaches from humanistic fields, urban studies, and design. From the tradition of literary criticism, especially of long-form 19th century novels. Kind of feel a little bit like my slides might be different than some of the diagrams and charts because of that training, but also from my background as a longtime public school teacher in South Los Angeles, which is this slide is from one of my projects that I did in South LA, based on a novel, actually, a Charles Dickens novel, Little Dorrit, about a river. So that's actually what this is called, to invoke kind of that body of water that's been so much a part of our conversations today. With this toolkit, I produce festivals, exhibitions, and productions that create imaginaries that we need to turn, that create the imaginaries that I believe we need that we need in order to turn neighborhoods or a city, even a planet, into a home. So with almost 2 decades of work in South Los Angeles with aspiring first-generation youth, for example, I founded Lit Labs, which are hubs for making place-based productions inspired by the study, or in some ways counter-study of so-called canonical literary texts. I guide my young readers, these young readers of novels, with a cast of fellow travelers drawing from literary studies, from dance, from architecture, from urban planning, and using urban humanities methods like spatial ethnography, thick mapping, filmic sensing, sonic scavenging. And I know I'm reeling off these terms, but if you want to talk to me about what these methods are, I can share during our kind of networking time. I turned to the urban environment as the matrix for transitioning students from readers of literature to placekeepers of cities. So for example, inspired by the Charles Dickens novel, which I know you've all read, Barnaby Rudge, we created the exhibition LA 1992, London 1780, where Dickens's multifaceted depiction of 18th century London mob violence enabled us to actually memorialize the LA 1992 uprising, which is where my school and my students were located, in a collaborative sonic work, 11 singles blending field recordings and poetry displayed in an exhibition featuring mapping, listening stations, original artwork, and a CD installation of 50 burned found sounds scavenged from significant locations around South LA. So here I'm really thinking about, the resilient imaginary, how are we building our sense of attachment to place, and how can storytelling really enable that through these different methods? Since arriving in Tucson, I've worked on resilience making with literature here in my new context in the Southwest. This is an image that of some of my collaborators, where we use David Copperfield, 1850, to produce the exhibition Book of the City, which is available online now. We have a virtual version, bookofthecity.com. I'm paying for that domain, so please go visit it. Reimagining the novel's roadside haystacks and London pawn shops as alternate Tucson landmarks, thrift stores, swap meets, or shrines to lost souls. Serigraph, social practice art, live choreography. Book of the City is a Dickensian vision in the desert, a collective Tucsonan tale of the city. From South LA to Southern Arizona, I am now reading and studying the novel of the south side of Tucson, its tale inscribed on murals that narrate Chicane activism, in maps that track the remediation of trichloroethylene or TCE contamination, or in everyday acts of public service and intergenerational care that sustain families and neighborhoods. With the Sunnyside Foundation, a leader in community advocacy in Tucson South Side, I'm working on creating ongoing collaborations that focus on El Pueblo Neighborhood Cultural Center, like the project documenting resilience in Tucson Southside, supported in part, I should mention here, by AIR and their AHR Arts Humanities Resilience Grants. Thank you. The project enabled local artists who were in fact University of Arizona alums to produce original artwork, notably Viva El Pueblo by Jessica Wolf, a 9-image series and oral history soundtrack inspired by the artistic corpus of renowned Tucson muralist David Dineo. So I want to end actually one of Wolf's images, which I think is just really kind of a symbol like monarchs, where she reimagined the iconic outstretched arms pose that you saw earlier in David Dineo's 1975 Nuestra Raza Gente Unidas mural for our own time, a feminine figure enwrapped in migratory butterflies, a welcome sign, as she says it, to our community. And I quote right here Congressman Raul Grijalva, whose office is at El Pueblo, a quote that she used to kind of support this image, this reimagination of the Dineo mural. What has guided me is that there's a presence here, the sense that you're from somewhere, that you have a place. If, as AIR has defined it, resilience is the practice of designing environmental and social systems to anticipate with and integrate with global change, I offer we need to turn to the ancient and ever renewable resource of our visions and our dreams, our stories and our symbols that emplace us in a shared past, present, and future. Resilience, I argue, is reading these reminders and prophecies about where and to whom we belong. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Roth-Gordon, and I'm an anthropologist. I conduct research on extreme heat in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and Cariocas, or Rio residents, would like you to know that it's hot, really hot there. People throughout Brazil quip there's a sun for everyone there, meaning you get your own sun following you around. But in a country that is ranked among the top 20 most unequal in the world, with high levels of structural racism, the burdens of extreme heat are not shared by all. I am especially interested in examining how race and class inequality influence a person's right and ability to stay cool. Together with my colleague Erica Robb Larkins at San Diego State University, I am collecting ethnographic data from a wide range of city residents on their daily strategies to mitigate heat. We have begun using the term thermal control to describe and theorize the limits of an individual's ability to control their own bodily temperature across race and class lines. Our research methods include interviewing and participant observation, visiting different city neighborhoods, and following people throughout their day and as they travel through the city. And these are some of the critical factors and sites impacting thermal control that we are studying. Access to nature. Rio is not only on Brazil's expansive coast, but it is also located within the Atlantic rainforest. And yet access to the beach or lots of green is limited by where you live in the city. The whitest and wealthiest residents live in remarkably leafy neighborhoods where orchids are grown on trees on the sidewalks within walking distance of the city's best and world famous beaches. The vast majority of the city's nearly 7 million residents can live hours away from these beaches by public buses. Some have never visited at all. There are very few public parks and hardly any pools in these parts of Rio, and residents may submerge themselves instead in small plastic kiddie pools or cool down with a hose. Infrastructure. Millions of people live in parts of the city with limited access to formal infrastructure, including running water, sewage, and electricity. In these parts of the city, blackouts are common due to the overloaded transformers, where individual families can be forced to string their own power lines illegally in order to access electricity. When these systems, which are not regulated or regularly maintained, become overloaded from the use of air conditioners in the summer, they can catch on fire. And residents, even children, know to throw sand to extinguish the flames. The resulting blackouts, which can last for days, can also limit people's access to water. Home and work. Perhaps the best examples of the extreme differences in thermal control that we are looking at come from a middle-class resident who told me that she sets her bedroom air conditioner in her condo to 22 degrees, or about 72 degrees Fahrenheit, every night, year-round. This way, if it's hot, even in winter, she sleeps comfortably at the same temperature. By contrast, my colleague brought a handheld thermometer into a bus where the driver was waiting. She registered a real field temperature, which includes factors like humidity, of 57 degrees, or around 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The driver is only allowed to turn on the air conditioning when the school children he drives are in the bus. He has no ability to control his ambient temperature while he waits, other than taking off his shirt and opening doors and windows. Moving throughout the city. While some residents can control their temperature by moving almost entirely between air-conditioned spaces, homes, cars, Ubers, work, shopping malls, restaurants, others may commute up to 3 hours a day each way in crowded buses, in addition to time walking on busy, unshaded city streets. A recent video that made the news during Brazil's November heat wave showed a mother breaking the glass of a bus window when her son started to suffer from the heat in a bus with a broken air conditioner whose windows did not open. The bus driver had refused to open the doors. Resilience. Residents do share strategies for cooling, including making their own DIY evaporative coolers by attaching fans to styrofoam coolers filled with ice, and through larger community-based projects like the greening of bus stops. But in order to study environmental racism and promote resilience, we must better understand how race and class inequality limit people's ability to regulate their own body temperature and the environment they live in and move through. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Yuri Makino. I'm Christine Harland. All right. While working on this film, my husband was admitted overnight for observation at a local hospital for food poisoning. Is that necessary? Okay. All right. Sorry. I won't move. My husband was admitted overnight at a local hospital for food poisoning. About a year later, we received our bill from the insurance company for $68,426. Our part was $400. Thank you, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Maybe. Because my husband's a U of A employee, next year when all of our premiums go up, that overbilling will figure into the millions of dollars we are overbilled annually. His single overnight stay for a bad piece of cheesecake will figure into, as I just said, the millions we are overbilled annually. We should all take this personally. As a well-meaning stipulation in the Affordable Care Act, insurers' profits are capped at 15 to 20% of the premiums they process. So the bigger our bills, the better their profits. And again, the bigger our bills, the better their profits. Healthcare is not broken. It is designed this way, all right? With every instance of overbilling, predatory or honest mistake, insurers make more money. But there is hope. There's a grassroots movement of healthcare disruptors, doctors, nurses, journalists, insurance innovators who are using the simple principles of fairness, transparency, and competition to restore healthcare to its noble mission. They are building community-based, patient-centered healthcare models grounded in the needs of the individual and the community. Now imagine your healthcare premium is $15 a week, all right? And the most you'll ever pay out of pocket is $750, ever, all right? Insulin is free, and your prescription drug benefit, including vitamins, is never more than a few dollars, all right? Imagine having free access to chiropractors, physical therapists, mental health professionals, a full-service gym with wellness education, all for that $15. By eliminating traditional insurers and cutting out the middleman, the Rosen Hotel Group has saved $540 million over the last 33 years. They've used that money to build free preschools and provide college scholarships to students living in 2 underserved communities. One of those communities has increased their high school graduation rate from 25 to 100%. the conversation around the table has changed from if you go to college to when you go to college.
You know, but these community healthcare models require strong leaders who are not afraid of disrupting the status quo.
Harris Rosen thought we can do better. First, he made healthcare accessible and affordable for his thousands of employees. Then he did the same for education for the neighboring community.
You know, the resilience of our communities depends on access to affordable quality care. Despite our insurance, we are all really just one serious illness away from financial hardship. We need new ideas and solutions that work today. We can do better.
Now imagine a hospital in Arizona, a rural hospital that's growing, that's adding specialties like cardiology, nephrology, pediatric dentistry, and naturopathic medicine. When, according to a 2023 report from the Center of Healthcare Quality and Payment Reform, over 600 rural US hospitals were at risk of closing. This thriving hospital, now in its 9th year, is in the San Carlos Apache Reservation, where Apaches heal Apaches, where physicians make house calls.
Where the next generation of Apaches are inspired to go into careers in healthcare because of a hospital-sponsored internship program. Where during the COVID-19 pandemic, through concerted efforts of the tribal council and hospital leaders, thousands of lives were saved. As a result, the mortality rate on the reservation was less than the state of Arizona.
But again, it takes strong leaders. When Kathy Kitchen took her daughter to the old Indian Health Service hospital, she looked around and thought, I wish I didn't bring her here. We can do better. Kathy became a driving force in the building of the new hospital and the transition of its management from the federal government to the tribe. She also became the first woman tribal council leader. Our documentary will help humanize the healthcare struggles of Americans and amplify the growing movement of healthcare reform, telling transformative stories that inspire change.
You know, but first and foremost, our film will empower communities and leaders with the knowledge that healthcare can be fixed and is being fixed today, one resilient community at a time. We can do better.
And then to go forward here. Thank you. Hi, I'm Iliana, and I'm an undergraduate majoring in environmental science and Spanish. And I'm from here. For generations, my family has lived in the Sonoran Desert, in Baja California, Sonora, and Arizona before it was called Arizona. Our stories are marked by resilience, making mesas out of mesquite, mining for copper in Cananea, tales of vaqueros, airplanes, and raising families in what other people would call scarcity. Alone and earning below the poverty line, my mom raised me and my brother here in Tucson. My family has worked, lived, and recovered hard here in this desert. And I'm here today because of them and because of the complex networks of social, environmental, and educational resources that have supported us. It takes many people to build and maintain a home. And home, to me and my family, has always been beautiful and precarious. Outside the windows of my home in Southeast Tucson, I see the mountains that protect us, the hummingbirds that bring us good luck, and our strangely comforting spiky plants. And I hear the roar of airplanes, constant reminders of our ongoing legacies of pollutants like TCEs, PFAS, and lead in our part of town. Family and educators taught me that all of this is home. I'm here today because I know that families like mine are more likely to face and shoulder heavier environmental burdens. Our neighborhoods, our workplaces, our environments are more likely to make us sick, hurt, and unhappy. But they also harbor an immense capacity for joy and opportunity. To do work that protects that joy, that protects home, is one of my dreams. And the Arizona Institute for Resilience's Earth Grant program has helped me realize that dream. As an Earth Grant intern, I work in Dr. Ramirez Andreota's Integrated Environmental Science and Health Risk Laboratory. Their lab investigates pollutants and helps communities understand the many components of where they live. They've worked with data from my community and places like it. As an intern in their lab, I support some of their projects in the Copper Corridor, a collection of rural towns in South Central Arizona named after the histories of copper mining, marked by stories of extraction, resilience, and regeneration. As a part of their Science Education Partnership Award, I support and develop environmental science and health education for youth over there, very similar to the kind that inspired me to be doing what I'm doing now. I get to peer into their very human and scientific stories to learn about their soil, water, and air, and their legacies of contamination, cleanup, and vitality. After doing science outreach in some of these towns, in Globe, Superior, and Hayden, I've realized our stories share many of the same beats. Our environments are compromised, but they're still ours. And I get to learn and be a part of the type of work that transformed my life, to build a culture of health in the green, to help people learn about home and how they can look after it. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Ramirez, our lab manager, and all the incredible graduate and undergraduate students in the lab for their cultivation of resilience in and off campus. I also want to thank Eaton for letting me use their mural to talk about home. You can go see it in person at the current UA Special Collections exhibit, Santuario, quienes pertenecemos, along with a lot of other cool pieces of AZ history. Work like theirs, which spans countless scales and disciplines, is why stories like mine can exist and be shared. My dream to work in environmental health or policy to protect communities like mine comes from the stories and networks that exist here, from the hard work of people around and before me. I am a product of the resilience rooted here. Thank you.
Take that off.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it off. Word. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for being here for today. What a wonderful day. Thanks to Sharon for organizing it. My name is Michael Bogan. I'm a desert stream ecologist, which is a very tiny part of the ecological research world, but it's one that I find very fascinating because of the dynamic nature of our region's streams. They can go from tiny little puddles during the dry season to raging rivers during the wet season, which as an ecologist is fascinating. And so I study how organisms are resilient, how they bounce back from those really dramatic seasonal changes, those boom and bust cycles of flood and drought. But the last 20 years or so of extended periods of drought, high temperatures have really pushed a lot of our stream systems to the brink of drying. And so really a lot of my career has felt more like an extended visit to a intensive care unit, followed by funerals for some of the streams and springs and species that I've studied and loved over the years. So it's been my great surprise that, whoops, a little sensitive, my great surprise that the best example of resilience that I've seen in my 25-year career has been right here in the middle of the city, in our urban core in downtown Tucson along the Santa Cruz River.
As many of you know, the Santa Cruz supported humans and wildlife for millennia. There's an incredible 4,000-year record of stewardship and water use and management of resources by the Tanoatam and the Huhukam ancestors. Myriad wildlife and fish species have been in the river since that time immemorial. But that all changed with the colonial development of Tucson and the growth of the city of Tucson in the early 1900s. With groundwater pumping, the river dried up. This lush situation that you saw here in the early 20th century disappeared. And this is really what people in Tucson came to know the Santa Cruz River as: a dry riverbed that's put in between concrete flood control channels that's not supposed to have water and it's not supposed to have life. So in the ensuing 100 years, you've had 5 or 6 generations of Tucsonans believing that the river is not alive and believing that the river is not supposed to have water. That changed in downtown Tucson in June of 2019 with the Santa Cruz River Heritage Project that the city of Tucson started. So here is that very first day of water being restored to the river. And in this case, it's reclaimed water or highly treated wastewater that the city has piped in and released into that historically perennial reach of the river downtown. Despite it being about 104 degrees that day, there are hundreds of people there, including, I'm sure, some of the folks who are in the room today. And it was beautiful to see people immediately reconnecting to the water in the river after a century of absence. But as an ecologist, among all these people, including my husband there, what I noticed were the wildlife species immediately coming back. So this is 3 hours after the flow has started, and I was seeing dragonfly and damselfly species already flying in, finding that water body, finding mates, laying eggs. And so in 3 hours, we're seeing the rebirth and the resilience of an ecosystem after 100 years of missing water. Once the crowds went away that first day, there were other species who came in that maybe didn't want to see as many people. Species like the Sonoran desert toads, which happily hopped in that night, reestablished their populations in the river downtown. And over the ensuing months, seeds from wetland plants blew in and it started to grow lush, as you see in the upper left-hand corner there, with cattails and other vegetation. And once that habitat structure was there, the habitat was reestablished, then some of the other species that rely on that reappeared, including rare birds like this Virginia rail, which hadn't been seen downtown in decades. So this was really beautiful, but not all species can hop or fly their way in. So we gave a little bit of a helping hand to some of our endangered aquatic fauna, including the Gila top minnow and the longfin dace, which we were able to reestablish in the river downtown, bringing them from other places where they'd survived in the last century, reintroducing them in the river where they're thriving now downtown. But arguably, the most important thing to me, or the most beautiful example of resilience, has been the cultural resilience of seeing people react to the river coming back, seeing people react to the water and the greenery and the wildlife that it attracts. In just the last 4 years, the number of people who've come to view the river as a living thing again has been really beautiful and incredible. And seeing people come down, spend that time, and really reconnect with the river that gave birth to the city of Tucson has been amazing. So my hope is that 50 years from now, what we'll have is 3 or 4 new generations of Tucsonans who once again believe there is supposed to be water in the river, it's supposed to be a beautiful place to visit, and it's supposed to be filled with biodiversity. Thank you.
All right, thank you, speakers. Those were fantastic. All right, we are ready for another break. So 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then we will come back. Philippa Johnstone, who's in the back, is going to give us a report on their art and science project related to soil health, drought resilience through soil health. So come back in about 7 minutes or so, and we will continue for our last part of today's activities. Thank you.
climate change graph. So here you go, and I apologize. But I'm showing this to demonstrate that we're going to continue to face these new environmental challenges, and we don't have a choice but to put our heads together and come up with strategies, technologies, and really just come up with a plan for how we're going to be resilient to this increasing aridity and extreme heat. So we thought a good place to start would be the soil. This is where our food comes from. And not only do we rely on soil for our food, soil also captures and stores rainwater. We learned that earlier today, and I'm going to reiterate it again and again because this is where our water is stored. It also cycles nutrients throughout an ecosystem, and it can prevent or slow down erosion. And so thinking about all of this, thinking about how soil supports the vast diversity of life above ground, we thought that this might be a good tool for us to be more resilient. And we know the consequences of what happens when we ignore the soil and when we don't start with the soil. But we also know the positive changes that can happen when we bring soil back to life. And something that I like to do with the students that I work with in this project is I like to remind myself and the students that when we're talking about soil, we're really just talking about those 6 to 10 inches. It's like a layer of skin over the earth. And not only is it fragile, it is ancient. So if we destroy soil, we don't have the time to restore it back into the timescales that are relevant to humans. So there's a real sense of urgency for us to build back our soil. And we can't develop widespread solutions without including an array of different resources and a way to get them out to everyday people. We can't just keep it all locked up in the university, right? And we all know that. So our approach was to conduct outreach to younger generations, particularly in high schools, as well as folks outside the university. Because without engaging a wider audience, we're not going to see this widespread adoption or even common understanding of why soil is important and relevant to our lives and what we can do to restore it. So what were our goals? As a project, we had 3 main goals. One was to actually conduct workshops and public events to talk about soil health. We also wanted to improve the PR of soil because people still call it dirt. Even though I have my shirt that says dirt don't hurt. And also we wanted to directly engage with the younger generations and folks outside the university, especially from underrepresented schools. So we mostly went to Title I high schools here in Tucson, and we worked primarily with local nonprofits and organizations. And our team is pretty eclectic. We come from different backgrounds. We all have different areas of expertise. Our director, Elise Gornish, has our expertise in restoration ecology. Dr. Barbaran is an expert in soil microbiology. Aaron Leon, soil science, or social science, I'm sorry. And then I have a former background in education, so I did most of the outreach and the classes for high school students. Ana Santos is an illustrator and artist, and she did the zine workshops and the murals. Claire Taylor is another artist here at the U of A who is working on a field guide about soil health. And then, of course, we have Albert Klein, who just does all of the behind the scenes work just to support everyone and everything that we're doing. So we're about halfway through the project, and everyone wants to know, what have we done so far? So here we go. Through the funding that we received, we were able to support 7 workshops, all run by these local organizations. And these workshops allowed for peer-to-peer knowledge sharings from stakeholders and land managers as to what are some appropriate strategies to restore soil health and adopt soil management practices. And at these events, Claire Taylor, one of our artists, sat in and listened to all the questions that people were asking and listened to the ideas that were being expressed and what people felt was most important to them when it comes to soil. And now she's in the process of pulling it all together and building and creating this beautiful field guide that will be distributed to an even wider group of stakeholders that bring soil back to what is relevant to our lives? Why should we care about soil, and what can we do to support soil health? And these are just some of the illustrations that are going to be featured in the field guide, mostly watercolor. I personally think they're gorgeous. I wanted to share them with you all. So next, I'll talk a little bit about the high school workshops that we've been doing. So I like to teach students about soil food web ecology, but in a way that's engaging and fun. So we play a game, and students each get to take a player, and essentially we read off a couple of different scenarios that could happen or have happened in Arizona, and they remove lives from their little life bar you can see there. This is very similar to what you might see in a video game. And then we do other activities, have them guess how long a mesquite root might go into the ground, and then they have to draw the tape measure. So it's a pretty fun, engaging workshop that really just gets their minds wrapped around, okay, what is soil made of? Why is it important? And then Ana Santos comes in and teaches students about the history of zines. For those of you who don't know what zines are, they're basically like DIY tiny magazines. And she does a fantastic job of telling a really compelling story about why zines can help you raise awareness about an issue that matters to you most. So the students, under the umbrella of soil, pick a topic and they write about it and they draw, and we have just a few of the many zines that have been made by the students so far. You can see we have a lot of students who are really interested in worms, which I've noticed, which I think is great. And then we have the students also working on designing murals. So Ana Santos also goes in and teaches students about the history of muralism. Why do we have so many murals in Tucson? What do they represent? And then the students actually get to design and conceptualize a mural that they then paint at the school, which is really cool. Here are some examples of what they've done so far. So at Compass High School, there's a rain tank that was just green. And together with the students, Ana Santos painted these beautiful desert wildlife landscapes and added the message that the students came up with, which was save soil and save our planet. That's another cool thing that they do with the students, is they get to come up with a slogan for the mural. The one at the bottom here is at Compass High School, and this is actually right outside the science classroom. And I just want to go back because I forgot to mention that with the zine making, these workshops have been so inspiring and impactful that some of the science teachers we've worked with have actually started incorporating zine making into their regular curriculum. So we had a teacher send us photos of students doing all kinds of zines related to science. So we just thought that was really cool. And this is a sneak peek of the mural that is being painted as we speak at the Children's Museum in Tucson, which, if you have not been to the Children's Museum, it is so cool. I got to go yesterday and I was just like, I want to stay here and play. And if you haven't been to the Children's Museum, make your way over there, because you can actually just see the mural as you drive by. There's two themes, day and night, both day in the desert and nighttime in the desert. And it's just a really playful imagery for students to see when they enter the museum. And last but not least, one of our exciting and upcoming events is a film screening at the Screening Room here in downtown Tucson, 127 East Congress. I put flyers out, so feel free to grab one on your way out or scan this QR code. The documentary is one of my favorites. It's called Regreening the Desert, and it's something that I think we all need to see and hear, because for once, it's a story where there was a positive outcome. It's not just another depressing movie about how the world is burning. We all know about climate change. We all know the consequences, but this movie is about how you can incorporate restoration even in the most harsh landscapes. So it's a positive, uplifting documentary about soil health. And we hope you'll join us. And I guess I just want to say thank you again for everyone coming out today, for AIR for supporting us. If you have any questions about the project, feel free to shoot me an email, or Elise will be happy to answer any questions. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Philippa. So we have a few minutes here. If you'll take out your devices again, your phone, your tablet, or your laptop, I would like to go through some of the questions that came up in the reciprocity ring and some of the answers. So I can call on people or people can volunteer. Is there anybody who would like to volunteer? Maybe what their question was and then some of the responses that they got that they would like to share and maybe talk about. Or maybe you didn't respond to a question, but you'd like to respond. Can I call on you, Ellen? And we have a microphone here. Let's have you use a microphone. I'm going to call on you because I know you're a friendly face, Ellen.
I'm a friendly face. Well, what I was going to do is actually express my gratitude to Sharon and her leadership in AIR that has really incorporated the arts really significantly into this mission of building resilience. And the money that AIR transferred to the College of Fine Arts, I'm the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Fine Arts, allowed me to create a grant program called Arts, Humanities, and Resilience Grants. And Jacqueline Barrios is one of the teams that was funded, and their fabulous project in South Tucson, the Living Archive. And Yuri and Christine were also one of the groups with their fabulous documentary on healthcare. And Yuri is now a Udall Fellow. So this year we've also integrated the arts into the Udall Fellowship Program. And I just want to say, you know, I'm just so grateful that Sharon has really put the money where her mouth is in terms of really integrating the arts and humanities more deeply into this big problem, which is not it's not a problem of getting more data. It's really a problem of changing people's whole perspective on who we are, how, and I like what you said, where and to whom we belong, and what we're going to do about that. So anyway, so that was my comment there. Thank you. I got to say something.
Well, thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate that. And you are a tremendous collaborator. So thank you. I think there was a question about how to, I think that came from Olivia, if she's still here. A question about how to integrate arts and humanities into our work more directly. And I know Jacqueline had some ideas about that. Do you want to share since we're on that theme?
Thanks again. Well, thank you, Sharon. And also just echoing what Ellen was saying. And I was teasing a colleague of mine. I said, you know, when you're asking about urban planners and engineers, but what about what can humanists or artists do about things like flood, you know, or soil health? And so part of it, I think, is creating a space where you, as you started this whole convening, that it is an inclusive space. And I don't think there's actually a lot of spaces that really thinks about inclusivity. And I think that, you know, this is my second time coming to these events, and I really do feel you have done such an amazing kind of convening art work where I do feel like I have something to say and contribute as a humanist, as a scholar of, you know, 19th century novels and urban space. And so I think it starts by just having spaces like this where there is a certain democracy of exchange that I think academia sometimes really does not allow us to experience.
Who would like to add to that or share a question or an answer or a comment? So many great inspirational ideas that have come out of today.
Sharon, I can propose a question that was asked.
Yes, please do.
Gregory Cushman, I don't know if he's still here, but he asked, I think, what looked like the most highly rated question, and I can put it up in a second, but he asked, you know, what isn't resilience, or like what shouldn't be considered resilience, kind of in relation to, I think, Nicholas Wilson's talk.
Yes, what shouldn't resilience continue to be? And it did get a lot of comments. Anybody who commented on that or who has a thought want to share Yes.
Hi, I'm Teo Wicklund. I'm a postdoc in geography. Yeah, I put a couple comments on the one about what resilience should not continue to be. And one of the points that I thought was worth bringing up is that resilience is sometimes used as an excuse to continue ongoing extractivist and exploitative um, systems and activities because, oh, well, the people who are affected are resilient. And the corollary to that is that it's also sometimes like, well, let's focus on resilience instead of focusing on actually transforming the systems that are necessitating resilience. Um, and so I think it's important to be really critical and reflexive about, um, who is benefiting from whose resilience. Yeah.
Thank you, Teo. Other thoughts, comments about that? Or another topic? Yes, please.
So that was something that really resonated with me too, because when I've talked about resilience, I'm Gina Gilson. I'm a postdoc at the Udall Center. And when I've thought about resilience, it's been in response to like how to design better governance structures to be resilient, how we can try to like think forward towards a resilient future. But that was a really insightful talk for me because I hadn't thought about this sort of reactive resilience and how there is this sort of tendency to, I think, co-opt a lot of these good ideas and it just kind of twists it in a way that, kind of glamorizes what people have had to do to struggle. And so I think there are like different ways of perceiving resilience in a way that I hadn't thought about before. So trying to pay more attention to the multidimensional aspect of resilience and being more specific about what we're talking about. That was really helpful for me.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at Yuri and Christine because maybe the systems, I think you had something to say about the systems that may need to be transformed so that we don't have to be so resilient.
Well, I mean, from our experience, I think just learning more about self-determination, I think is really an important fact in how, the tribe itself has leadership for their own future and are really working to empower and educate their community. Which is then sort of expanding the hospital, which is very involved in all kinds of initiatives. And so sort of, helping each other forge their own path.
I just want to go back to the notion, currently on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, there's an issue with Oak Flat, which some people may be familiar with. I was very startled to learn that we're still taking land without permission from reservations, without the involvement of tribal council. I guess in regard to resilience, there's the conversation goes, if we put the mine there, there'll be a resilient economy and we'll give something to the community. And I guess for me, and it's kind of a concrete example of allow the community a voice at the table for these decisions, and not only a voice at the table, but the voice at the table. And so I guess it's a little bit different than the healthcare discussion, but it was something that we unearthed when we were working on the reservation this summer. And it really just, it's relevant to the discussion we're having about self-determination.
Thank you. Michael.
I think about your point a lot when I'm telling good news stories about the Santa Cruz River because, if you go around telling people, oh yeah, well, after a century, all these species came back, everything's great, then, that could be used to say, oh, we could dry up any riverbed or bulldoze or do anything. And eventually the species will come back. And it's really hard in a 5-minute setting, but I try very consciously to tell the full narrative, that there is resilience. That resilience that we're seeing is in part because other ecosystems have been conserved around it that are allowing the resilience to even happen in the first place. And second, that there are aspects that were not resilient. There are extinct species that used to be in the river that will never come back because of what happened, right? But we get really bogged down in the doom and gloom and extinction, and and that's a very real thing. So I try to tell the positive story but also be real about it, that not everything comes back, no matter how much we want it to.
Thank you. Philippa, can I call on you? Yeah. So when you were talking with the kids about, healthy soils and, drought resilience in terms of soils, did they have some of these same perspectives that we're just talking about recently about?
So in their own way, yes. I think, well, first of all, I'll just say this. It's really hard to engage teenagers in science. And I think what helped and what got a lot of voices out at the table was every student was assigned a character, but the characters were like real people. Like there was a picture of a student wrapped in a cattle blanket and he was a rancher. And a lot of the students might come from ranching backgrounds or agricultural backgrounds. And when it was their turn to, so I gave them these little cards with the lifeline or the life bar, and each had a starburst on it. I think that helped, having candy. But, a student would like take away 4 starbursts out of 7 after a wildfire occurred. And I would ask them, why? What happened? And some of the students were really cognizant not only of their own, like, oh, well, obviously my business took a hit because my crops didn't grow or whatever, but they also talked about the other students in the room. Like, well, there was a restaurant and they're like, well, my supplier, the lettuce farmer, also took a hit. So as a restaurant, I took a hit. And I know that's not really answering your question directly, but just getting them to think about things in a holistic way. Like as a community, it's like a domino effect, right? It's not just your individual life that's impacted. We are impacted. Everybody hurts, right? In some way. So I think getting students to think about that really helped make soil health relevant and at least hopefully interesting.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions? Yes, Jacqueline.
I noticed like a lot of the questions and even this conversation is about, because I'm like thinking about words, like the definition of resilience and, and how, and I actually am really curious about air and how the definition came about, what that process was like, because it's about adapting to global change, right? Coming up with designing systems that allow us to kind of adapt to change. And I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting definition. And so I just wanted to know what was the process for defining resilience? What are the processes by which we can continue to sort of like talk through, what it means or what it shouldn't mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm looking around at my colleagues. So when we came up with our collective vision, we had a definition of resilience, and then we tweaked it a little bit based on that collective visioning process. I have to admit, I don't have it memorized. I'm looking around like, does anybody have it memorized? No. Okay. I didn't think so. It's on our website where we really focused in that kind of revised definition was around equity and around making sure that resilient responses took into account equity, that it was, we were working towards solutions that would be equitable. And so I think the change that we are talking about is environmental change, kind of broadly defined. It might be climate change, it might be drought, it might be heat. It's some kind of environmental change that we are focused on in terms of resilience. So I'm sure that's not a very satisfactory answer. Does anybody want to add to that who participated? I'm looking at Liz and Shelley and Amanda, Leona, you can jump in.
I was just thinking the same question, Jacqueline, while you were talking, and my name's Leona and I'm part of AIR. So, and also just looked up the website if I get the definition, maybe we can read it out loud. But thank you so much for your comment, Teo. I think that's also something to echo others that I think about a lot. And definitely one of the main criticisms of the word resilience, that it assumes oppression and that we're sort of giving oppression a slide. And I think what I thought of when you mentioned that we put in the mine and we have a resilient economy is maybe something that has to be part of that definition is a long time scale. Like, what is the time scale that we're thinking about here? I used to work for the community food bank, and we use the word community so much that it stopped having any meaning for me whatsoever. And I don't want that to happen to the word resilience, but it has become a word that has just meant so many things. And so it's important, I think, to really define what that means. And maybe, again, it's thinking about health and relationships, but then how they can be sustained over the long period of time. Thanks.
Yeah, and one of the talks last year, I don't know, for those of you who were here last year, one of the student talks actually mentioned resilience doesn't necessarily have to mean that you go back to where you started. You might go on a different trajectory that is still resilient. And so there are a lot of those R words: restoration, recovery, rehabilitation, resilience, that suggest that you're returning to some previous state that you've established has value. And that talk really had an impact on me because she talked about resilience as being not necessarily returning to a previous state, but having the capacity to thrive and to continue maybe on a new trajectory. Iliana, I'm looking at you. You look like you want to say something. Oh, okay.
Are you talking about Gabby Parra's presentation from last year? Yeah, it was great. I took a lot of cues from the way that she presented. I think, yeah, there's a lot of R words to describe, hopeful outcomes that we want, in our environment and in our communities. I think resistance, revolution, the people who are working hard to change things, that's super important. But resilience, the idea of recovering and being able to bounce back, that's also really important. I feel like you need both, all of them, all the R words, well, the good ones.
Great, thank you. Okay.
So our focus is resilience, which is the capacity to respond to environmental change in innovative ways by adapting toward more sustainable and equitable outcomes. And I just want to say that when, through Sharon's leadership, we had just a really great planning session where we all got together and talked about what is resilience to us and coming up with this definition. And it was such an amazing process. And we're really proud of that definition. So thank you, Sharon.
All right. Any additional questions, comments? This is wonderful. I really appreciate all your insights. Is the food here yet, Amanda?
Liz, is the food here yet?
Okay. It will be soon. It will be soon. Well, I have one more bit here. So we'll do that. Can you put that slide back up? So, we've been going through some challenging times here at the university, as we all know. Oh, you got it. Okay. Regarding finances, our budget, and so forth, I'm here to say that I have a hopeful announcement. We are going to do the competition for the annual resilience theme again. So Philippa reported on what their team is doing for this 2023-2024 academic year, and we are going to host that competition again. We are not quite, because we just realized we could do this just a few days ago. We don't have everything set up on the website yet, but we are going to host this competition to provide funding through the TRIF-WEAS initiative for an interdisciplinary team to develop and execute a creative and inspiring year-long agenda of events and activities focused on a single resilience-related theme of the year. So there will be more information available about this. Right now, there's a little bit available on the WEAS website. So if you go to west.arizona.edu/funding opportunities, there is a little bit of information about the AIR Annual Resilience Theme Grant. Our due date this year is a little later than last year. It's April 15th. And the proposal is pretty short. It's just a few pages, and we ask a set of prompt questions. And one team will receive up to $100,000 for these activities over the next year. So this can really be whatever you imagine it to be. The idea is to engage people across the university, to engage people in the community, to use a variety of approaches from any discipline really that you or any practice that you're involved in. It's really wide open. And the idea is to help people learn and appreciate some central focus of resilience. And so in Philippa's case, it's really been about soil health. And so I think through your activities, a lot more people appreciate how we can achieve resilience to drought through, or at least make progress toward resilience to drought through enhancing soil health. And so that's the kind of multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary activities that we are looking for in these proposals. So I'm excited to announce that I hope that you'll join together with some folks you've either met today or some people that you know from your work on campus and in the community to prepare a proposal for this. As I said, we're going to try to keep the process pretty easy, not onerous, so that you can put together a proposal fairly quickly. And we'll hopefully know about, we'll make a selection before the end of the semester so that you can start your planning activities before everyone starts to scatter for the summer. And with that, I want to say a huge thank you once again to all of our speakers, our panelists from WMG, the musicians and video artists who presented their work today, all of the participants, all of you who came and participated and shared your ideas with each other and with the group, and our amazing AIR team that put this together. This is a lot of effort. There are a lot of details that had to be attended to make this work. So I want to call out Amanda Lucero, Shelley Litton. Shelley might have left. Anna Seiferle Valencia, who's online. Liz Pedersen in the back of the room. Deanna Lewis, also in the back of the room. Olivia Miltner. She's still here. There she is. Thomas Weiss. Oh, there's Shelley. Oh, okay. Did Thomas leave? Okay, Aaron Tanaka, who I think is over at Tumamoc Hill today, and Ray Granillo, who's in the back as well. Thank you all so much. I get to work with such an amazing group of people. So with that, we are adjourned. Please go out into the courtyard where there will be food soon. Live music for about an hour. There is food. Excellent. Please enjoy your time together, and I really appreciate you all being here today and participating. This has been wonderful. Thank you.